Hello everyone, I'm back after a brief hiatus. I'd like to bring you the letter M. M can be for two determiners or quantifiers. The first is mair, mair, M-A-I-R, which is Scottish for more. And the other one is maist, maist, M-A-I-S-T, which means most, as in the majority of. But first I'd like to tell you a little story, a true story. I was back in Edinburgh, my hometown, not too long ago, and I drank more alcohol in 5 days than I have done in 5 months. Most of the time was spent in pubs, which I wouldn't recommend, especially if you're in a relationship and you want that relationship to last. And it was on one of those days when I was in a pub and I had to go to the gents, the men's toilet. And I'm standing there at the urinal and an old man came in and he stood right next to me. Now, I don't really like having a conversation while I'm pissing with total strangers. But the old man turned and asked, "Where are you fae? Where are you from?" And I replied, "I'm fae Edinburgh, I'm fae here." Then he leaned a bit closer, a little uncomfortable, and said, indicating the bar, "There's mair of them than there are of us. There are more of them than there are of us." And I wasn't too sure what he was meaning or who he was talking about. So I was like, "Sorry?" And he said, "Most of them aren't fae here. Most of them are not from here." And that's when I thought, oh aye, here we go. One of Weird Uncle Nigel's reform followers, anti-immigrant, anti-this, that and the next thing. And I was surprised because in Scotland, we tend to be quite friendly, welcoming to foreigners, to immigrants, compared to other countries that make up Britain. A very learned friend of mine came up with a possible hypothesis as to why this is, why Scottish people aren't really xenophobic. And he thought it might have something to do with Scotland having a very strong national identity, and we don't fear it being taken away from outsiders, unlike the country next to Scotland. For example, if I asked one of my Spanish students to tell me the first thing or things they think of when I say Scottishness, they'll quickly rattle off kilts, whiskey, haggis, a bad diet, ginger hair. And I would say, yep, and yep. Now, if you asked the same Spanish person to sum up Englishness in a few words, they would probably struggle. Like Englishness, not Britishness, they're distinct. Okay, they might say black cabs. And I'll say, no, they're British. Red telephone boxes. No, again, they're British, they don't even exist anymore. Arrogant cunts. No, unfortunately, we have them too. All right, I'll give it a go. How about middle-aged bald men wearing England football tops with tattooed arms and red skin due to an inability to apply sunscreen, sitting in a town square in a foreign country singing songs about bombing Germany 80 years ago and or ruining a Neil Diamond classic? Maybe. Anyway, back to the old man. I started to get a bit annoyed, so I said, "Listen, pal, I don't know who you're talking about, and I don't really want to know either." And that's when he leaned even further, and I could smell his breath, but he had this sparkle in his eyes, and he said, "Most of them are fucking English." And that's when we both burst out laughing, so much so that I ended up pissing all over the place. Till next time.